Good morning, everyone. Mike. Kindly be seated. We are going to start the program now. Technician. A very warm welcome, each and every one of you. It is such an honor to see such a wonderful people from across the country and also from all parts of Switzerland. Thank you so much and welcome to the 2019 Geneva Forum on China's high-tech repression and freedom of religion. In addition to those of you in the room, I would also like to welcome those who are joining us through online, through Tibettv, Facebook, and YouTube. So welcome to the 2019 Geneva Forum. In the right hand, technology has empowered people from increasing connectivity to access to information, virtual space for freedom of expression and association, and to the documentation and sharing of information about human rights violation and abuses. Unfortunately, from time and again, we have been reminded, and there are numerous reports which indicated that there are no such technology that is exclusively used for good causes. In the hands of repressive states like China, who is becoming internally repressive, externally assertive, technology has become an additional tool for such state to further repress, or it has become an additional tool to infringe upon and suppress fundamental human rights both at home and abroad. So this forum is led out to discuss those broader issues. With that note, I'm honored, and please join me in welcoming on the stage Representative Chimi. And please join me in welcoming our chief guest of the event, Dr. Lobsang Sengke, President of the Central Tibet Administration. And please join me in welcoming our special guest, Carlos Sumaruca, Member of the Parliament, Switzerland. Thank you. May I request Representative Chimi to kindly deliver a welcome address and reading of the written message received from His Holiness the Dalai Lama for the 2019 Geneva Forum.
Good morning, Tracy Delay, and bonjour. Respected Chief Guest, Dr. Lobsang Sengke, President of Central Tibetan Administration, Honorable Special Guest, Carlo Somaruga, distinguished panelists, all the representatives from various permanent mission, human rights organization, member of civil society, ladies and gentlemen. It is true pleasure for me to welcome you all to the Geneva Forum on Chinese high-tech repression and freedom of religion, jointly organized by the Department of Information and International Relations and the Tibet Bureau in Geneva, Central Tibetan Administration. This forum is of second time of its kind. There is no doubt to say that advancement of technology has immensely helped in the betterment of human lives. At the same time, what we have witnessed over the year is that in the hand of authoritarian states such as China, technology has unfortunately become an additional tool to oppress and silence those who do not behave and talk the way Chinese like. The human rights situation in region under China, particularly Tibet, East Turkestan, and Southern Mongolia, and the ongoing concerning situation in Hong Kong are further deteriorating, with Chinese deploying sophisticated surveillance systems, including facial recognition, biometric registration, GPS tagging, etc. Meanwhile, the growing attention and more realization of how technology has become a tool for the authoritarian regime like China in further violating people's rights has disclosed one facet of human rights and development with Chinese characteristic. As all may agree with the ramification of China's misusing the advancement of technology could extend far well beyond Tibetan, Uyghur, Inner Mongolian, Hong Konger, and other people of faith in the region under China, if these threats are not controlled or prevented, or at least countered in a meaningful way. Therefore, I strongly believe that this forum will foster in-depth discussion on technology and human rights in digital era, and more importantly, uncover to what extent China has gone deploying high tech in silencing dissident, surveilling human rights defender, suppress people of faith, culture, identity, and list goes on. Time has come for a serious attention and deeper discussion on the issue from head of the state, policy maker, UN member state, UN human rights mandate holder, and civil society is more urgent than ever. With this note, I once again welcome you all for the Geneva Forum on Chinese high-tech freedom of religion. Thank you, Tashidele. Long live His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Now, with most humbly, I take this honor of highest privilege and blessing of reading the message from His Holiness the Dalai Lama to participate in this forum. The message is: I send my greeting to participate in this Geneva Forum on human rights in the People's Republic of China. I have always maintained that China is an important country with which the rest of the world needs to engage, However, such engagement should always take into account the fundamental values that guide humanity. This means that the international community should not hesitate in pointing out unjustifiable action on the part of the Chinese government, whether in a denial of basic right to the citizen of the People's Republic of China or in action across the globe. I hope this conference can help train a spotlight on severe restrictions that religious communities are facing in the People's Republic of China. Over the year, China has been changing, and I hope it will follow the global trend towards transparency and freedom. The international community should support China in becoming a nation with rule of law, respect for freedom, and commitment to human rights. Such an outcome will be good for China's own future. If this wishes to assume its right place in the community of nations, it will also have to shoulder the responsibilities that come with the position and uphold both basic freedom and fundamental human rights. Dalai Lama, 31st October 2019.
Thank you, Representative Chimirik Singh. May I now invite Sikyong Dr. Lobsang Sengke, the President of the Central Tibetan Administration, to kindly address the gathering.
Good morning, everybody. You can say good morning too, actually. Yeah. Our special guest, Honorable Carlo Sommaruga, Member of Parliament, Switzerland, and Representative His Holiness Dalai Lama, Office of Tibet, Geneva, and we have other representatives of offices of Tibet from Europe, and former Special Envoy Gesa Genzela, and we have Honorable Member of Parliament from Canada. We have Dokum Isa, Bolvi Group Congress President, and many speakers from Taiwan, Falun Gong, and other issues as well. And I would also like to acknowledge and welcome former political prisoner Phunzo Nyingela here to be with us. She will give her personal testimony as to her participation in protests in Tibet and her imprisonment and suffering, and finally coming to exile. Now she resides in Switzerland. And I would also like to applaud the staff of DIR and the Office of Tibet for being, very diligent in their efforts and making today's event a success. And I'm sure in the next few days you will learn a lot about high-tech repression of China, and we have many experts who have come here and who will share their views. I'm not an expert on high-tech repression, so I'll restrict my comments on Tibet in general and religious freedom. But artificial intelligence is called the fourth industrial revolution. But from all accounts, China is way ahead of many countries as far as high-tech and artificial intelligence is concerned, especially in surveillance and controlling its citizens. There was a report which reported that the Chinese government employees generated 450 million comments in just 1 year in favor of the Chinese government and critical of other governments or other organizations, individuals. 450 million. And through these efforts, you can clearly see that they want to control or get ahead of the fourth industrial revolution and use artificial intelligence to control their own people and export the technology to the rest of the world. And we have read reports about some countries like Zimbabwe, Ethiopia, Ecuador, Venezuela, Pakistan are all adopting and adapting the Chinese technology in controlling their people and obviously exporting to other countries as well. Now, within China, it's reported that through Skynet, they have installed 20 million cameras. It varies, number varies from 20 million to 200 million, but 20 million cameras. In 2010, Chinese government has put 800,000 surveillance cameras in Beijing alone. By 2015, Chinese government claims to have covered the whole of Beijing with surveillance cameras. And through these cameras, what they do is, as it's reported in the, as reported by representative of His Holiness as well, that through facial reading, through DNA, through biometrics, they generate data. Through this, they create the social credit system. And if your social credit is high, you get to travel, you get to buy tickets. If your social credit is low, you are denied plane tickets. Now this is for Chinese people in China. Now, as far as Uyghurs and Tibetans and Mongolians are concerned, if your social credit is low, you are not denied airplane tickets, rather you are sent to prison. So that's how severe is as far as situation in Tibet and East Turkestan and southern Mongolia is concerned. Now on this, I'm sure other experts will share, but rather I will focus on one issue, one example. Through this micro example, perhaps you'll get a macro understanding of repression in Tibet. Now, the Chinese government claim that Tibet was always part of China. And the example they give is, one example is that a Tibetan king married a Chinese princess called Wang Chen. And through that marriage, Tibet joined the family of China. Now, interestingly, in this history, what is not said is that the same Tibetan king also married a princess of Nepal. But the princess of Nepal was a senior queen. Now, both the queen and the king sit in one room in Chokhang Temple. Now, on the right side is the princess of Nepal, because she was the senior queen. On the left side is the princess of China, Wang Chen. So as per Tibetan tradition, whoever is the right side is senior or more respected. Now, interestingly, Chokhang Temple symbolizes, quote-unquote, harmony between China and Tibet, historically, because Chinese princess is there, Nepali princess is there, and the statue in the Chokhang Temple was actually brought from China, originally from India, brought from China, and is respected and recognized as the holiest shrine in the Tibetan Buddhist world. For us, Chokhang Temple is like Mecca or Vatican. Now, interestingly, Chokhang Temple, which symbolizes harmony and good relationship between China and Tibet, is being misinterpreted, or rather misused. For centuries, Tibetans from all the various parts of Tibet, they travel to Chokhang Temple to get the blessing. They do prostration in front of Chokhang Temple. Not only that, some people and nomads and farmers start doing the prostration from the villages and nomadic area and do prostration through prostration for hundreds of kilometers, travel all the way to Chokhang Temple to show their respect and get blessings or good karma. Now, if you go to Chokhang Temple today, what you will see is sharpshooters on rooftops, surveillance cameras watching over you. Now, some bloggers have said there are more guns in Chokhang Temple than butter lamps. There are more cameras in Chokhang Temple than windows. The Chokhang Temple, as a holy shrine, has been transformed into an example of colonization of Tibet and repression of Tibetan people. So clearly, as far as religious freedom is concerned, is denied to Tibetan people, and holy shrine is converted into a surveillance mechanism or rooftop with sharpshooters. Why I say this is, if you look at the track record of the Chinese government, when Chinese army first invaded Tibet, first thing they destroyed was monasteries and nunneries. The first monastery to be destroyed was Lithang Monastery in 1956. And after that, an estimated 6,000 plus monasteries and nunneries were destroyed. Now, there are some China experts in this room. Often when you mention that Tibetan monasteries and nunneries were being destroyed, they say, well, during Cultural Revolution, so many other religious institutions and churches and mosques were also destroyed. But as per the report submitted by late Panchen Lama, 70,000 characters petition was submitted to Chinese leaders Mao Zedong. In that, he lists that 98% of monasteries and nunneries were destroyed, 99.9% monks and nuns were destroyed. But this report was submitted in 1963. A cultural revolution started in 1965, which means before the cultural revolution started, 98% of Tibetan monasteries and nunneries were destroyed, which means the Chinese Red Army sole purpose was to wipe out the Buddhist-based Tibetan civilization and to deny religious freedom to Tibetan people. And even today, the destruction and demolition continues. We have heard and read about the demolition of Iyengar Nunnery. Just this year, Iyengar Nunnery had about 5,000 nuns. Now, if you Google the photograph of Iyengar, you will see that exactly half of Iyengar has disappeared. And it happened in broad daylight just last year. And Larungar Monastery had an estimated 20,000 monks and nuns, of which 2,000 or 3,000 were Chinese followers. And it was also reduced to half. Not just that, Larungar was further divided into a religious section and an academic section. And Chinese government built buildings to provide accommodation for 200 Communist Party members to monitor ins and outs of Larungar Monastery. And obviously, surveillance cameras were installed, they were followed, and they were checked. And obviously, Larungar Monastery is under strict surveillance. And 3 nuns committed suicide after the destruction of Larungar. Because once half the monastery is destroyed and half the monks and nuns were expelled, for monks and nuns, they leave their homes, they leave their livelihood to join monastery, and they make monasteries and nunneries their home. And once that is destroyed, the basic or fundamental rights is being violated and denied. So my point is, from the time of invasion, even till now, destruction of monasteries, demolition of nunneries are continuing, and denial of freedom of religion is continuing. With this track record, the Chinese government wants to recognize the next Dalai Lama. Now in 2007, Chinese government issued a document number 5, in which they have categorized how to recognize lamas. If you think you are a lama, you have to register at a district level Communist Party headquarters. And if you get the certificate, then you're authenticated as a lama. But if you think you're of higher rank, you can apply to the state level Communist Party headquarters. And if you get the certificate, you're a state level lama. And if you think you're much higher than that, then you can apply for national level certification. Now, can you imagine a religious lamas seeking authentication and certification from a Communist Party leaders to be a religious leaders? Now, this might sound funny, but it's serious business as far as Chinese government is concerned. In 2007 onwards, first they recognized 300 lamas as the authentic lamas. Now, by April 2016, they recognized 800 lamas. By November 2016, the number has increased to 1,300 plus. Now, they are the authenticated, certified lamas by the Communist Party of China. Now, they are given workshops, they are giving trainings. And just this year, several dozens of lamas were given workshop in Lhasa. And one lama is quoted as saying, "Finally, I got enlightened as to how I should act and behave as a lama." Enlightened after getting workshop from the Communist Party members. And is quoted as saying, if you are an authenticated lama, you should do followings. You should do the followings. 1, first, you should respect the Communist Party. Number 2, you should work for social harmony. Number 3, you should be politically correct. Number 4, you should not have any connection or contact with international organizations, which includes all of you. And number 5, you should have no relationship with His Holiness Dalai Lama. Now, it's very interesting. Of this 1,300 lamas, you cannot have relationship with His Holiness Dalai Lama. If you have, your certification will be denied. And of this 1,300 lamas, only one person who's actually missing in the list is His Holiness Dalai Lama himself. But the Chinese government says they want to recognize the next Dalai Lama. Now, this is serious, because on July 6th of this year, I met one Indian journalist who was going to Lhasa for a paid trip. And after 1 week of paid trip by the Chinese government, 9 Indian journalists came back and all reported with the same headlines, saying China will recognize the next Dalai Lama. India should not interfere. If you do, there will be consequences. Now, already, based on 2007 document number 5, China is in a way threatening India from interfering in recognition of the Dalai Lama. Now, if China is already doing this to India, what do you think China will do to the rest of the world, to many of the small countries in the whole world? So with zero credibility whatsoever, after all the destruction of monasteries and nunneries, disturbing monks and nuns, now They're saying we have the authority and legitimacy in selecting the next Dalai Lama. And they will use every means to persuade, to pressure many countries to recognize the next Dalai Lama. So this is serious business. Now, as far as Tibetans are concerned, our argument is very simple. Number one, Tibet is a land of Buddha of compassion. Charity. Dalai Lamas are the manifestation of Buddha of compassion. So hence, Tibet and Buddha of compassion are inseparable. Dalai Lamas and Tibetan people are inseparable. Charity and Dalai Lama represents the symbol of Tibet. As far as Tibetan race is concerned, we say, actually we are taught, our father was a monkey, manifestation of Charity, which is quite similar to scientific notion of evolution. Our mother was an ogress, manifestation of, goddess of mercy, goddess Tara. Now, from our accounts, ogress actually is quite beautiful, but in the Hollywood movie Shrek, she's projected not as that beautiful. So, with the father as a monkey and the mother as ogress, Tibetan race started. So hence the idea of Tibetan nation, symbol of Tibetan identity, originates with Buddha of compassion and Dalai Lamas. And also the idea of reincarnation, we invented it 1,000 years ago on 4,000 meters high plateaus of Tibet. So we have complete copyright and patent over the idea of reincarnation, because there are many Buddhist countries in the world. They don't follow reincarnation, except a few, which is an extension of Tibetan Buddhism. So as Chinese government has no right whatsoever to claim any legitimacy or credibility in selecting any lamas, far less His Holiness Dalai Lama. So this is at stake. And Chinese government is moving ahead with their plan, and we must do everything possible to make it very clear that reincarnation of Dalai Lama will be decided by the Dalai Lama himself. Reincarnation of other lamas will be decided by lamas and no one else. This is a case of religious freedom, and this is also a case of separation of church and state. Church will not interfere in the state matters, state will not interfere in the matters of church. So this is the case. So this is what we are facing in Tibet today, and in months and years to come, I'm pretty sure the Chinese government will make their argument and take many journalists to Tibet and persuade them to write their version of story. I just read a Washington Post article. He Facebook lived in front of Potala Palace. And he said 17 journalists were taken to Lhasa just recently. And he said, for journalists in Beijing, it's more difficult to get access to Tibet than North Korea. But he was allowed to FaceTime from Potala Palace. And in that story, you can clearly see what the Chinese government is trying to do is persuade these journalists to write their propaganda. In fact, in that video, it's pretty clear. He says, we are fed with propaganda of the Chinese government, and a handler who is from the Chinese Foreign Ministry says, please don't say propaganda, just say publicity. It's got in the video too. So this is what Chinese government is trying to do. Get journalists, get diplomats, get researchers, scholars to feed them their version and propagate or spread propaganda throughout the world. So this is the challenge we are facing. Hence, today's event, high-tech repression and freedom of religion is very important for us. We organized similar event last year. We felt it is very important to have like-minded people who are suffering similar experience under the PRC's repressive system to come together, share our testimonies, share our experience, and let the international community know what is actually going on in Tibet and in East Turkestan and southern Mongolia and Tibet and other places like Hong Kong as well. Actually, this event should be happening inside the United Nations building. But the reality is China is one of the superpowers, and UN is now second highest funder of the United Nations is the Chinese government. So through a lot of mechanisms, we are denied access inside the UN building, so we are having this side event. Now, also inside the UN building, what is happening is very disturbing. Chinese government is trying to restructure the United Nations system, redefine human rights. And they have already passed 2 resolutions on their definition of human rights. If they succeed, next time when we approach UN Human Rights Council, when we advocate our case, they will say, as per the new definition of human rights, Chinese government has fulfilled most of the criteria, and you, the Uyghurs, the Tibetans, the Mongolians, the Hong Kongers, you cannot make your case in the Human Rights Council. So hence, stake is very big. Stake is not just about Uyghurs, the Hong Kongers, Taiwanese, Tibetans, and Mongolians. It's larger, it's much larger. It affects the whole world. If UN is restructured as per the Chinese government and other authoritarian governments, and human rights is redefined as per their definition, then human rights as we know it will be diluted, if not destroyed. Hence, stake is high. Please bear this in mind, and we are here to give our testimonies, share our experience, to warn, to let the world know what happens to Tibet will happen to you. What happens to Uyghurs, the Mongolians, the Hong Kongers will happen to you. Because the surveillance of Tibetan people started decades ago. Now it's being exported and coming to countries near you. So this is a real challenge. This is a real threat for the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sikyong Dr. Lobsang Singila, for highlighting the high-tech repression carried out by China and also the religious persecution carried out against people of faith. May I now invite Honorable Kalu Sumaruka, our special guest of the forum, to kindly address the gathering.
Your Excellence, the representative of the Dalai Lama, Çhina Rizgen, Your Excellence, the President of the Central of Tibet Administration, Longtang Sangay, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor for me to speak for the first time after my election as senator in the Swiss Parliament here in the earth of international Geneva. It is in this place recognized worldwide as a center of reflections and dialogue on human rights, humanitarian law, and the law of protection of persecuted women and men. I would like to thank the Tibet office of Geneva for granting me the privilege of taking the floor at the theme China high-tech repression and freedom of religion, which crosses several of my political concerns to which I am committed in the national level. Mainly my country political relation with China authoritarian power, the massive human rights violation in China, and the worsening of technological surveillance of citizens by the political authorities of various countries, including China, and by multinational companies. At the end of the Second World War, Western countries, and more particularly European countries, wanted to protect themselves against the horror and the violent and authoritarian regime that swept across Europe. To prevent nationalism and war and ensure prosperity, it is integration of national economy into a liberal model based on freedom of trade and industry, sole proprietorship and capital profit and accumulation of good that has been proposed at regional and global level. A model that produces social inequality is cracking everywhere with the uprising of the neglected, mattered by the police and the army now around the world. To prevent the arbitrariness of the state and barbarism against individuals and minorities, it has been proposed that a catalogue of individual fundamental rights be drawn up that each person but each minority can assert against the state. It is a universal Declaration of Human Rights adopted by the United Nations General Assembly on the 10th December 1948, in Paris. A founding text that all states must respect, include China. Some community of states have gone further and developed political and judicial instruments for the respect of human rights. This is the case of the Council of Europe, its Parliamentary Assembly, the European Convention of Human Rights, and the European Court of Human Rights. A convention signed in 1950 and a court adopted in 1959 that made it possible to defend human rights, ensure the freedom of citizens, and lose the legal straitjacket that states are always ready by nature to put in place to assert their authority over individuals. On the other side of the world, in China, in a completely different historical, economic, and social context, history was written in a very different way, and the philosophy of human rights was interpreted by the government as a collective requirement rather than a framework for respect for individual rights and the rights of minorities, including cultural and religious rights. In this context, in 1950, in violation of the principle of United Nations Charter adopted 5 years earlier, and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights adopted 2 years earlier, without any consideration for the history of Tibet, the existence of Tibet as an independent state, the Tibetan population, its culture, and its Buddhist religion, the Chinese army entered Lhasa and took up residence in front of the Dalai Lama residence. The 14th Dalai Lama, spiritual and temporal leader of the Tibetan people, was just 16 years old at the time. We all know that this was the beginning of a devastation of Tibet, his authorities, its culture, its religion, and undertaking its unfortunately still in progress. From the 17-point agreement on the peaceful liberation of Tibet imposed on the Dalai Lama's representative to the most recent pressure on the Western state of Çhina that has become a worldwide economic power, nothing is spared to the Tibetan people in Tibet and in exile. The control of local authorities, the destruction of monasteries such as Iyengar, the persecution of religious and men and women, and the sending of these men and women religious to the re-education camp, the mining of the rich subsoil without regard to the environmental requirement, suicide of despair are the most visible expression of China's planned destruction of Tibet. Worse still, the repression against the Tibetan minority has gradually spread to other minorities in China, and particularly to the Uyghur Muslim minority. For both Uyghur and Tibetan, religion practicing are equated with extremism or terrorism, while freedom of religion belief is enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. In 2019, here in Geneva, the seat of the Human Rights Council and the international capital of human rights, we would have liked to celebrate, on one hand, the progress made in respect for human rights throughout the world, and the other hand, the decline of the hold of state over citizen. citizen freedom. We would have liked to have been able to welcome the exemplary commitment of democratic state to strengthening the international implementation of human rights, in Çhina particularly. But we have to say the disappointment is there. With regard to Çhina, the reason of state and the commercial interest of many countries make illegal annexion of Tibet, the massive violation of human rights and the right of minority unnoticed in the contact with, between the authorities. In fact, my feeling is that the Tibetans are left by the democratic movement on their sad fate. Ladies and gentlemen, in recent years, new technology and social network have been celebrated as an instrument of liberation and mobilization of population against authoritarian and illegitimate powers. Similarly, these new technologies have been praised for facilitating financial transfer or commercial operation for small farmers in Africa, bypassing costly intermediates. Finally, information transfer analysis algorithms make it possible to better prosecute criminals, particularly in the area of pornography or pedophilia. But like any technology, new technology can be used for the worst thing. Think about nuclear technology. But here, however, new digital technology can be misused against individual citizens. The implementation of abusive practice against individuals using latest digital technology is carried out by both private and state company, private company and state. For companies, the challenge is to capture data, to use individuals to collect the most personal and intimate information, to transform all our behavior into merchandise and profit. But what is more important is the objective to change behavior in order to correspond more effectively to the expectation of commercial actors. For company, it is also complicity with the state through the provision of new technological instrument or data allowing permanent monitoring of citizens, whether in China or elsewhere as in USA under the Secret Prism program. For the state, the objective is a complete control and monitoring of citizens. This objective is not only prerogative of authoritarian states such as China, but also of so-called democratic states, as Edward Snowden has shown by revealing the NSA illegal but very widespread practice. In China, however, the degree of implementation of individual surveillance is striking. It is all the more rapid because in China, there is no legal instrument to protect against the arbitrariness of the state, like we have developed in Europe after the Second World War. Today, nearly 600 million cameras are installed on the territory of China. The Chinese startup Watchlix has thus marketed a system that makes it possible to recognize an individual solely by an approach, and that has already seduced the authorities of Beijing and Shanghai and more others. Members of the Uyghur and Tibetan community must carry a smartphone that permanently indicates the location, which can be monitored and scanned, and the data analyzed. The clandestine listening of conversation through telephone generates a permanent suspicion between citizens. Facial recognition with full social control, especially of religious and cultural minority, heralds a totalitarian system, or any deviation from the behavior line defined by the political authorities, however small it may be, can no longer be expressed under penalty of sanction and deprivation. Digital surveillance worthy of George Orwell's worst-case scenarios. This is now an urgent need to denounce, to be outraged, to take action here and elsewhere to combat this digital surveillance and the totalitarianism that results from it. It is to the all citizens around the world the necessity to mobilize against this implementation of this surveillance of citizens. I am convinced that the work of today Geneva Forum will help to advance the understanding and the process of the process and the reflection on the means of action in China, but in Switzerland too, and elsewhere to resist and give hope and freedom to the population. As Swiss parliamentarian, I can promise you that with my colleague or member of the Swiss parliamentarian group, Swiss Tibet, we will do all what we can to participate to this resistance about this surveillance of citizens in Çhina especially, and in Tibet and against the Uyghur. We will make what we can to push the Swiss government to move of its position and make more critic about the violation of human rights, the religion express right, and generally all the violation of human rights in China. It's necessary to give an hope. We are here for that. I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Carlos Sumaroka, for highlighting the severe human rights situation in China and also bringing forth the irony that China was one of the first members to sign the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and also about the current digital surveillance that China is using against the people, vulnerable people under its control, like Tibetan, East Turkestan, and all. So thank you so much. So with this, we come to the end of the opening session. Before we break for coffee, we would like to request Honorable Carlos Sumaroka to kindly accept a memento, Tibetanka, in appreciation of your time for being here today, and also your support for the just cause of Tibet for so long. So may I request President Dr. Lobsang Singila to kindly present the memento. Thank you so much once again. And we have a coffee break now, and we will come back at 11 for the first panel. Thank you so much.